Peter Thiel's very, very interested in young people's blood. No, Peter Thiel's not harvesting the blood of the youth. Peter Thiel wants to inject himself with young people's blood. Peter Thiel denies being a vampire, but he said he wants to live forever. These are the type of things you find if you look up Peter Thiel's name on the internet. Now, he did admit that he is interested in something called parabiosis, which is the act of injecting the blood of somebody younger into you to have youthful benefits, but he did feel compelled to say on the record at a New York Times conference that he is not, in fact, a vampire, but what he is somebody you should be deeply, deeply afraid of, because he might be the most powerful, influential person in the world that we are not talking about, and he is doing some weird things right now and has a lot of influence over this administration. Let me elaborate. So in 2016, Gawker reported that he spends $160,000 a year buying blood from young people, which probably is not true, seeing as he single-handedly destroyed and bankrupted Gawker for outing him as being gay in 2007. So in response to that, he went on a 10-year vendetta where he funded lawsuits against Gawker in the shadows. Nobody knew he was doing this. It was all part of his plan to bankrupt Gawker. And finally, the perfect opportunity came across when Hulk Hogan had a sex tape leaked by Gawker and he wanted to sue them. Peter Thiel funded the thing behind the scenes. Hulk Hogan had no idea it was him, and he hires this hotshot Hollywood lawyer, gets a $100 million lawsuit, puts the company out of business. That's what happens when you're on the bad side of Peter Thiel. But if you get on his good side, he can make you a king. In 2011, he's at Yale University giving a speech, and this young boy named JD Vance is there in the crowd and gets a chance to talk to him after, and he says, quote, "This was the single most influential thing that happened to me while I was at Yale." And this is a weird situation because, Peter Thiel's a billionaire at the time, and after this happens, he's generous enough to just be a mentor for JD Vance. I mean, you don't hear about that every day, that a billionaire just becomes a mentor for some college kid. Then a couple years after that, JD Vance graduates from law school, and Peter Thiel convinces him to not go into law, but to work at his venture capitalist firm. Not only work there, but he makes him partner at his venture capitalist firm. A little weird. So this is 2016. 3 years after that, in 2019, he encourages Vance to go start his own venture capitalist firm with Thiel's money. These things are all weirder than the last. A billionaire takes time to be a mentor to a college kid. A billionaire makes college kid a partner in his venture capital firm when he went to school for law. Then he gives him the money, the seed money, to start his own competitor business against him. By this time, JD Vance is a millionaire, okay? In 2021, he introduces Vance to President Trump. I guess former President Trump at the time. And in 2022, he gives the single biggest donation to a Senate race in history, $15 million to JD Vance. So Vance wins that election, obviously. All right, so this is all well and good. We're nothing to be scared of at this point. But something that we should be deeply afraid of is the plan. What is his interest in this guy, JD Vance? Why is he doing this? So let me tell you a little something about what Peter Thiel's been up to for the last couple decades. They say data is the new oil. If that's the case, then Peter Thiel is the new JD Rockefeller. So most people have never heard of Palantir. It went public in 2020, but it goes all the way back to the aftermath of 9/11. So the name Palantir comes from the seeing stones from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, symbolizing its mission to provide clarity through data, like the all-seeing eye. Now, in January 2002, months after the attacks of September 11th, DARPA created the Information Awareness Office and proposed a radical surveillance initiative called Total Information Awareness. The goal? To collect and analyze vast amounts of data and personal information to attempt to identify and profile potential terrorists before they could even strike. But this program was so crazy and extreme that Congress immediately shut it down. The media was all over. They're like, hell no, get this out of here. This is insane. There's no way you're doing this. So they even tried to rebrand it. They called it the Terrorist Information Awareness instead of Total Information Awareness to make it sound a little better. But the name change wasn't enough. The program was terminated and officially dead. Then, the next month after, this company called Palantir gets started. It's a little bit weird. The first round of funding came from the CIA venture capitalist branch called In-Q-Tel. And for the first couple years of Palantir's existence, the CIA was its only client. Now, interesting thing, Whitney Webb notes in her book that Peter Thiel and Alex Karp say that they started the company in 2004, but public records showed it started in 2003, so I don't know why they're trying to hide that. Today, still 40% of Palantir's revenue comes from government contracts, and its stock went absolutely through the roof when Trump got elected. I wonder what they think is on the horizon. Now, you remember the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they do predictive crime programming analytics, where they could look at a profile of a person based on your data and say, that person's going to commit a crime. We need to arrest him proactively. That is precisely what Palantir is working on right now. They've done this with the LA Police Department. They've done it with the New Orleans Police Department. They even partnered up with Elon Musk and Starlink and they did something called Project Maven in the Ukraine war, where they are using AI to acquire vast amounts of data and precisely pinpoint targets in the battlefield. Now, it sounds good when it's on our side, but I mean, what kind of things can be done with this stuff if it's used against us? Now, you might be asking yourself, how does Palantir even get this data that tells all these things about us? I mean, it's a government contractor, so how could he get the stuff that we use? Because the companies that we give our data to give their data to the government. So Palantir creates software profiles on people they deem high risk using data from social media, phone records, financial transactions, and even surveillance footage. So Palantir works with military intelligence agencies, police departments, federal institutions like CIA, NSA, FBI, ICE, and the Department of Defense. All these agencies feed their data to Palantir because they get to use it after it gets fed to Palantir and processed and packaged up into something that they can use and act on. Doesn't just stop there. Palantir also gets data from companies like JP Morgan, Airbus, BP, and all the big tech companies that have government contracts like Google, Facebook, Amazon, you name it. So pretty much all the big, juicy, high valuable data in the world, Palantir has access to via the government. Palantir is even able to scrape publicly available data and create digital profiles based on social media activity, news reports, forum discussions, satellite imagery, etc. Now, this is something we must bring up. In 2013, Edward Snowden leaked classified documents revealing that the NSA PRISM program allowed U.S. intelligence agencies to directly access data from our tech companies, including obviously Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Yahoo, YouTube, Skype, Dropbox, everything, you name it. So just like the movie Minority Report, you have to ask yourselves, what if the predictions are wrong? Or what if they, I don't know, just like the government has done in the past couple of years, if they wanted to jam somebody up for a crime they didn't commit, what if they said, oh yeah, sorry, our analytics tell us that you're gonna rob a bank or commit a domestic terrorist attack because you hit the like button on a MAGA post, so we're gonna arrest you now. Like, that could totally 100% happen with this stuff. So that's why you should be terrified of it. Now, if I haven't scared you enough already, to go a layer deeper on this, to go back to Mr. Peter Thiel's political philosophy has evolved over the years. He now believes in something called the technocracy. He says, quote, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. He's argued that libertarian billionaires, tech visionaries, and AI systems should direct society's future instead of slow, bureaucratic government. So this brings us to something called the Dark Enlightenment, which is it's an advocacy for technocracy. It was brought up by a guy named Nick Land and today Curtis Yarden, which interestingly, JD Vance acknowledges Curtis Yarden, sort of says complimentary things about him in an interview. In a recent interview, JD Vance says, quote, so there's this guy, Curtis Yarden, who's written about these things. And Vance goes on to say, if Trump were to get elected, this is him speaking before he's vice president, he should, quote, I think what Trump should do is fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. Well, who are your people? And when the court stops you, stand before the country and say, the Chief Justice has made a ruling. Now let him enforce it. So you get what he's saying there. You might feel the urge to say, like, yeah, that sounds great. Screw the government, screw the bureaucrats. And yeah, I'm right there with you. But be careful what you wish for. Because if you think that socialism and fascism and feudalism is bad, then think twice about how bad technocracy could be. Because that's the direction that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel want to take us into. Check this out. So this is a quote from Whitney Webb. Quote, to say technocracy is radical would be a massive understatement. We think in terms of political isms, but words like communism, fascism, feudalism don't come close to describing the extent of the radical tyranny intrinsic to technocracy. Now, to get a little preview of what technocracy is, the psychopath that once lived named Zygmunt Brzezinski used China as a test bed for what technocracy in a technocratic state would look like. It's basically when you use technology, government surveillance to rule over the people, because when you have systems like that in place and the people allow it, when there's no constitution in place to stop that, then you can be dominated by technology, and it's the most ruthless form of authoritarianism. Now just look at the Trump administration, how they got these, I guess you could say, technocrats lined up in the administration. They're kind of floating them in there. It was these guys who encouraged Trump to pick JD Vance. Like, Trump was at a dinner earlier in 2024 in June. He was with David Sachs and Chamath, and he was asking the guys, like, hey, who should I pick for vice president? They're like, oh, definitely JD Vance, definitely JD Vance. Why? Why JD Vance? Why do they have such a vested interest in that? Well, like, I guess because JD Vance, whether he knows it or not, he has technocratic tendencies. I mean, if you're gonna go out and agree with Curtis Yard, and you kind of have technocratic tendencies. Now look at this cabinet. You know, you got, just from Palantir alone, you got Akash Baba, Department of Government Efficiency; Anthony Jensko, Department of Government Efficiency; Clark Minor, Chief Information Officer at Department of Health and Human Services; George Cooper, Department of Government Efficiency; Gregory Barbasia, Chief Information Officer at Office of Management and Budget; Jacob Hellberg, Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment. All from Palantir, now in government. So to really drive home the point that I want to drive home, I harken back to the days when the Rothschilds like openly ran things. They still run things behind the scenes. They're always famous for funding both sides of the war. So they had a plan, a vision for both outcomes. They knew how to get the objective they wanted, no matter who won. So we were going in the direction of socialism, globalism, if Kamala were to win. Now, right now, we're going into a direction of a like technocratic era. If now that Trump has won, now that Elon has such a big impact, and Thiel has such a big impact, and JD Vance might be the next president. So I think we have to be careful and not be so eager to say like, oh yeah, I love everything they're doing. Everything they're doing is such a great idea, because we might be just running right into the slaughterhouse without even knowing it. I haven't seen anything from JD Vance to be super alarmed yet, aside his history. Like, everything that he says right now is fantastic, and it's hard not to like him. I mean, that's why Peter Thiel thought he was such a good candidate, because he's a likable guy. He seems he's disarming. You want to like him. But let's pay very close attention to what JD Vance says and does over the next couple of years, and let's pay very close attention to what Peter Thiel is doing behind the scenes, because he's a creepy dude, and he has all the power. Like I said, he's the new JD Rockefeller. Whoever controls the data right now, to a degree, controls the world. With that said, thank you for watching, and next week we're going to talk about why Trump is afraid to release the Epstein files. Equally terrifying. And if you want to know more about these topics, I talk about it at length every night in a much deeper way in my community on Circles called the Forbidden Book Society. So go on to Minnect, go to the Forbidden Book Society circle, and you'll, like, this is the tip of the iceberg, and that's the iceberg. Click right here or in the description if you want to join me on Minnect in the Forbidden Book Society, the smartest people in the world. It's a network of deep thinkers who get to the bottom of stuff like this. Nobody else is calling it out, we are. So check it out, Forbidden Book Society, right here in the link and right here. God bless, see you there.